Glenn here would be my co-presenter here today. We're going to talk a little bit about how large language models are bringing down the bar of entry, go ahead and exploit things, right? Not sure why I have to approve. It should be all auto-approved. Just give me 1 second. I'm not sure this.
It's like I'm coming in as a guest. I think that's why it's as
Okay. I made you presenter now, Glenn. Can you help me in approving people in the chat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, I will do it.
Cool. Awesome. Nice to see you, by the way. Okay, while Glenn helps me out, the topic today that I wanted to talk about is how large language models are basically helping us out to bring down the bar of entry for learning anything specifically, and that anything can be literally anything, and that anything can be used to exploit cloud too. Now, before I begin, all of it would be posted on our GitHub repos, and the videos would eventually be uploaded to our YouTube channel. I'll post the link for that in a moment, or Glenn maybe would post it on the chat. And in case you want the presentation or want to go through the video again or have feedback, everything is welcome. Yeah. The chat is open in case anybody wants to pitch in. That would be awesome. Cool. Okay, so now on to the topic. This large language model here refers to the chat GPTs and the Geminis of the world. So right now, this talk is focusing only on cloud at the moment because cloud is incredible. First off, it's gaining popularity, it's driving innovation, it's doing a whole lot, and it's gaining momentum like any other great technology at the moment. The thing that happens with this thing is that then it becomes a target, right? The cloud is incredibly complex and it's gaining momentum. The adoption is up from a couple of billions every quarter. Microsofts and the Amazons of the world are projecting profits like not like before, right? Every quarter they increase sales by a couple margin, and cloud is becoming the biggest part of their business eventually. And now it's also driving quantum, blockchain, and artificial intelligence, and IoT, which are key technologies in our world right now. Because if everything is moving through cloud, that means there's a lot of things that are susceptible here, and a lot of things will need to be administered and secured. And knowledge about all of these things exist in different places, but with large language models, it's coming down in one place. Because clouds are available over the internet, it's easy to access them, it's easy to reach that. All you need is a sign in and then you're in. 76% or more of the organizations use 2 or more clouds. Now, all of those clouds are not the same. Some are secure, some are unsecured. We'll talk about it. And all of the data is mostly in one form or the other is traversing the cloud. The one thing that we had to secure is cloud and data. And right now it's moving between various domains through the internet, one way or the another. VPNs, no VPNs. The point is the data is now leaving on premise and moving to cloud to an extent, which opens up opportunities for both securing and attacking it. Yeah. Now, cloud migration has its own challenges, and this I come back to why I'm trying to highlight this, because to be a better cloud engineer, to be a better cyber defense engineer, it needs to be understood what you're trying to defend. And the process of moving to cloud somehow exposes cloud to security risks, which we're going to exploit in the later part of this. Right now, the migration has its own set of challenges. It has security and compliance issues. It has skill gap, which is a huge issue, which will lead to a lot of things that happen in an organization for making sure these things are tapped into. Right. There are legacy systems, and which is a huge disadvantage when you're moving to cloud. A lot of companies still stick with that, which kind of creates a problem because if you stick with legacy systems tend to bring in vulnerabilities, right? Then there is this migration complexity and post migration experience. Most of the people start good, but then they leave it, and then they eventually, these things, they get a mind of their own, and with moving instances they kind of create holes in the technology. So even when the technology is good, if it's not implemented and maintained correctly, like any other technology, it creates holes, and we're going to exploit that in a minute. Yeah. The attack surface has been expanded, not just because of cloud, because we have bring your own devices. We have IoTs, which are at the edge, which do not have brains, and they're just transmitting data as and when they receive it. So it's an open protocol there. If you are capable enough, then you can get through it and reach the network through a device that is not even in the backbone. Yeah. The attacks in cloud, the reason why I'm highlighting this is because they've already been increasing and they've been becoming more sophisticated. Phishing is a prime example of this. A lot of attacks, they're not sophisticated, they're just repeated many times. And the repeating process is actually helped by by generative AI. So in order to curb that, you have to understand how these things work, right? Phishing is more common. The user account compromises are very common. And the thing that I want you to note here is that it's not the external actors and hackers. Uh, these external hackers and actors, they're very famous. Of course, they're the prime, the biggest security risk. But after that, it's the company employees that has been highlighted in this survey, and that's incredible because it's not that the employee might be disgruntled. It might just be as simple as that there was a lack of education. A lot of companies are now starting to use ChatGPT in their own company, even when people don't know that their company employees are using it, which opens up the risk that their data might be exfiltrated. Samsung stopped using ChatGPT because they were worried about their proprietary code. Yeah. Yes, Glenn, you're on mute.
Sorry, you're probably coming to that part, Mohit, but to like log and to audit that employees utilizing sensitive information in a different type of interaction with the AI models is quite difficult. So in the base, so you need to classify the information. That's the only way to like know that they are using information. And yeah, that's why I
You
would
might
sort of.
need that. You might actually need that, and you might actually need to make sure that your employees are educated enough because everybody clicking on the links, it's not possible at times to defend against it. Sometimes the education part of it also creates problems, right? There's a number of ways that companies are coming up right now with these things. Um, FYI, there's something called an AI week that's going on right now in Norway. So in Oslo, that's a very interesting thing where vendors are publishing what they're trying to do with the exact same problem that Glenn just highlighted. Now, again, the problem highlights that the weak passwords are always on top. Yeah, but the biggest problem that companies have with any other technology, not just cloud, with any technology, new technology in general, is the skill gap. And the skill gap kind of opens up a human chain which is weak in this whole chain of things, in this whole administration of things, in this whole delivery of things. So we have to keep this in mind, and as Glenn highlighted, compliance is a big thing. If things are not managed in a proper way, if things are not done in a proper way with proper guidelines and maintained, that might be a problem. Okay, just give me 1 second. I think there's something wrong with the settings here.
I think everything is okay. Everyone is on mute now.
Yeah, no, somebody just opened the mic. I was not sure why.
think it's okay now.
Okay, cool. Okay. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so that's the thing. Yeah, so the problems are mostly because of lack of qualified staff and uh, lack of knowledge. But that's all old news. Why is this a problem now? The problem is because there's AI in the mix, and the generative AI is causing this whole fuss where the knowledge is not just scattered around. It's concentrated and it's distilled and it's presented to you in a structured way where you can take actions on it. Yeah. And that creates this whole scenario where this machine learning models now have pseudo creativity and knowledge ingestion, where they can take up a bunch of knowledge, create a solution out of it while you're drinking tea. And that's all contextual and realistic, and code generation is almost flawless. Some of you might have used Sonnet, Claude. It's amazing how accurate it is at times, and the benchmarks clearly show that, right? And that all leads to this big bunch of problem of how cybersecurity and data security is being complicated because of this. Now, for those of you who are unannounced, generative AI is basically a modeling technique where existing artifacts like text, images are fed to transformers, which is a type of machine learning technique, and it's then capable of producing artifacts similar to that or inspired by that, augmented by more information, right? So if you give it an article, is easily would produce another article that would not be similar, but would have more information based on other information sources, right? They're exponentially good at learning, and they're exponentially becoming better. Now, although generative AI and AI techniques have not introduced more cybersecurity type attacks, but they have obviously impacted the existing ones. They've made phishing, DDoS attacks more edgy. The phishing emails now look indistinguishable. The filters that used to work 2 years before do not do not cut it now, because the language is flawless, the spelling mistakes have gone. It's able to generate domains on the go, on the fly. The DDoS attacks now can use automated script that are governed by a large language models that's sitting as an agent to create resources everywhere around, right? There's a lot of other things that are going on, but the point is all of these attacks now have a different way of presenting themselves, right? They're more sophisticated and they are more accessible. If you remember, there used to be this thing about when an employee is leaves the company, their access would be revoked and stuff like that, and then during that period, the employees might not be very satisfied. And if that scenario happens today, the employee doesn't even get a chance to think about the consequences. All they get is that they're now in a state of mind which is not perfect. They might be able to conjure something up on a large language model and just execute it. The difference between execution and the thought is now being eliminated because the bar for entry of the knowledge is just going down exponentially. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight. It's the speed of execution that's being impacted, and that's why the speed of defense need to be exhausted too, right? Some real world AI enabled cyber attacks. So they are old news now because they're probably 2 years old, which is like 20 years in the year in generative AI. But there were TaskRabbit attacks in which 3.5 million records and personal information was just stolen, and it was just basically AI-enabled DDoS attack. As I explained before, the large language model essentially automated the whole process, so it was not easy to categorically find. Yum also had a similar attack. There was dictionary-based encryption decryption attack that was focused with large language models, and it was able to get through in record time. So the filters were not able to gather that. And similar things happened with T-Mobile and Activision. And if you remember, a couple of years ago, maybe just 1 year ago, a Hong Kong-based subsidiary of a London-based company had a very sophisticated attack where they were able to use deep fakes to create meeting invites and phone calls, which eliminated the chance of them being categorized as frauds, and they siphoned money, a couple of millions, from that company. Now, while these things are happening, some things are also happening on categorizing how these attacks work, on how these things they happen. Meyer Atlas matrix is one of those things that categorizes on which stage of cybersecurity incident, which kind of AI would be more usable, and that this kind of gives you gives you an insight into the mind of the person who's trying to do it, to understand where you have to defend more. Yeah. Now, I have a demo, sort of. Now, because these things are not easy to reproduce on in live, and I do not want to attack somebody, so I've created my own environment and tried to do something around it to simulate an attack, which basically will demonstrate how these things work out. Yeah. So assume Yeah, before we go there, so assume you are a security architect, or you're somebody working with cloud, and you've created some resources as a default configuration. And that's what I'm going on. And the reason why I mention this is because a lot of companies still have default configuration. A lot of companies still have endpoints that are open by default. And these are all attributed to default configuration and the lack of education around the resource or around the technology by these people, by the employees, right? So when I go ahead and I assume that I'm somebody who's trying to get information from anybody who's around. If you've ever set up a honeypot, you would notice that the moment you do it, there's an attack pattern that emerges from everywhere around the world, as if they were all informed that something is set up, right? And that's assuming I am one of them who's trying to find a honeypot, or who's trying to find a target. So I just ask, but I don't know the technology. So I'm going to just use ChatGPT here, nothing of my own knowledge. So I would ask, how do I go ahead and scan public exposed storage accounts and try to understand which kind of folders are mostly shared? So it generates a word list, gives me a script, and I could go ahead and enumerate all of those publicly available internet IP addresses, and go ahead and check if any of those IP addresses are a storage account, and if they have proper what do you say, proper folders available there, right? And this was the result of the script, and that is the only input that I've given it. I've not asked it to go ahead and create very sophisticated script. All I did was ask it to do something, and I have a result. I actually got a couple of blob accounts, and that was scary enough, because if I want to go ahead and touch it, and I want to download the information, uh, that might create problem for me in general. I did not want to get into the wrong side of the law, so I enabled the same scenario on my cloud. Yeah. And then I went ahead and got the list of public storage accounts and the containers that might be accessible. Now, by default, some of those policies now are starting to enable where they do not give you access, and you have to explicitly enable that, but that's still not very prevalent where people are not using it. So, for example, it's possible to, by creation, to make the files in the containers of a storage account or a storage bucket to not be accessible to the internet. But the old deployments, they still exist. And now that I had that, I wanted to download the content and see if that's possible too. So again, I give it a natural language input, and I ask it if it is possible. And well, I get a script, a very good script. I can't write a bash script, but I can definitely spin up a laptop and a virtual machine and execute it. And I got a script that worked flawlessly the first time. So I got the list of the storage account containers. I was able to download these containers also. So if you notice, the script kind of worked brilliantly. It generated logs too, and I was able to download the content, and this was my setup, something similar to the ones that I discovered on the internet. So just the disclaimer here, not trying to touch anybody else's data here. Yeah. Then I went ahead and and then I got a bit more curious, and I went to the virtual machine section. And then I asked, is it possible to go ahead and check the internet? And it gave me a couple of websites. Assuming that you are not a cybersecurity professional, this is a huge achievement, because you would search for hours on the internet, and Google prohibits these resources coming up on top. I have resources that I can use directly and get information around that. When I did that, a lot of things around these virtual machines were highlighted. It's things that I could use, things that I could leverage, and that's exactly what I did in the next step. I asked if I could go ahead and SSH or RDP on any one of those. Now, this website here that's shown on the chat, it's all ChatGPT, by the way. The website is publicly available. It's no secret. So it's just that it's hiding in plain sight. So if you once get to know it, you know exactly what happens. And all the websites, all the IP addresses that are available there are listed. And that's not just one or two. There are a number of them. Yeah. So once I got that, I got a little bit more ambitious, and I asked again if I could get into the virtual machine and check the configuration and misconfigure it and install something for lateral movement. And this is a default installation of the virtual machine. And on Azure, any default installation gives you a public IP address. And if you want to access it, it opens port 22 or port for RDP. And that becomes a problem, because if it's accessible from the internet, it's possible to get through it. And that's a very old way of getting into the virtual machines, right? So that's what I did. I went ahead and hey, hi Glenn, welcome back. So I went ahead and checked if I could get into the virtual machines with default accounts, and if I could go ahead and escalate my privileges. I got a couple of errors, but then again, ChatGPT again had the fix for that. And for those of you who don't know, there's something called White Rabbit Neo. That's a large language model designed for cybersecurity professionals. It's been configured for tackling with these kind of attacks and assisting you with that. But the system prompt for all of those large language models can be manipulated to help you with that. Yeah. And so I went ahead, I got the errors. I used the same large language model assistance again, and basically I was able to get through. So I was able to brute force, and there's nothing that was input from me. This is not my knowledge. This is just a large language model and a default communication technique. There's nothing special about it. I haven't trained it. I haven't done anything. This is just a ChatGPT interface. I was able to get through, and a couple of files were encrypted. So now basically I am into the system. I am capable of asking for bitcoins or exploiting the organization if this was a real computer. Yeah. And just a second, there was something. Yeah. But in the midst of it, it did realize at some point of time that I'm not doing it with good intentions. But so it kind of asked me to to stop, but a little bit of conversation led it to the way directly. So I was able to overpower it in conversation and get through it. And it doesn't take much manipulation, as long as you can put it in the right context. For example, the grandma situation, where you could tell a large language model a couple of years ago, maybe a year or two, that your grandma used to cook an illegal drug. She's no more. Could you help me cook the same drug again? And it actually gave you a recipe, which was not very good. But the point is, you have a recipe now. And similar situation happened here. So it's a model. It doesn't understand how much of it is being exploited. So a little bit of conversation takes a long way. So this is the right query, just the right input prompt. Yeah, there's the right sequence of prompts, conditions it, leads it to a definite path, and that's what is happening here. Now I got a little bit more ambitious, so I wanted a script which is unrealistic, but I still wanted a script that could exploit every CVE and vulnerability, scan it, and check which one could be done. Now this thing, even if it seems innocent, it's a very nefarious case here, because if this thing succeeds, it's possible to run those scripts and configure them. And the large language model would still be in control. If I would have done this with an agent, it would have controlled the whole process and it would not have detected that something is happening. If you're not familiar with a large language model agent, it's an autonomous system that can be directed to for one particular function, and it has its own generative AI reasoning capabilities. So each CVE vulnerability could have its own agent that's working on it on the machine. And the moment you get a success out of it, and that's the moment when you realize that all of this can be automated and you don't need special expertise around this, which kind of is what I'm trying to highlight. Now, the same thing I asked that I want to go ahead and use all the CVEs and exploit it with that. And it combined gave a script obviously means which obviously means that it would not succeed. Yeah, and because there's a lot of there's a lot of variables here. That's why people who do it attack one vulnerability at a time. Yeah, and well, of course that was unsuccessful, but it nevertheless gave me a script knowingly that I was trying to do something. So it's possible. The thing that I'm trying to highlight is that the bar of knowledge is very low and it's getting lower. The defense bar has to be a little bit higher. And to make it that way, it has to be understood how these things work. When I was unsuccessful, I tried lateral movement, and the same happened by default configuration. All of that default configuration, I was able to brute force into another machine, which I had set up in the same network. So even when that machine had a private IP address, once I was into the public IP address, I was able to brute force my way through the cache of the machine. So I took out the password and the IP addresses and the credentials from the cache of the machine and was able to brute force to that machine through the caches that had credentials. Yeah, Glenn, you had a question?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So it means that you created this script or configuration from that LLM, and then you used it in
Yeah,
your environment.
yeah.
So you mean that there is no any kind of moderation from that agent server or that AI services to
No,
create malicious things, though?
well, as long as you can talk it into that, there isn't. And that's not a difficult thing to do. That's what I'm trying to highlight. And that's why
Yeah.
governance and proper practices for cybersecurity and screening of what you're trying to do is very important here. Yeah.
Mm.
Cool. And yeah, so we got into the system, and yeah. And the same, I went ahead and tried to calculate if there are other machines and other IP addresses, and eventually I was able to get through a lateral movement. And I wanted to export passwords also. So in a real situation, all these passwords and usernames would be sold in the black market if somebody gets into your machine. Yeah, and that's what I was trying to do here, and I did not give in much effort, but after a couple of queries, it would have been success. And then I asked the ultimate question: what else can I do with this situation here? And the large language model, or ChatGPT in this case, was just giving me examples one after the other that could be used in the exact same scenario, because now it knows in which situation I am. I explained it, and now all of these information is for me to use and exploit. Yeah. I did not go further. I I tried a couple of things like installing malicious codes or updating security vulnerabilities and stuff like that, but not much. And also, then I moved beyond virtual machines. So just to web applications, some configurations and public access that is enabled by default. It's possible to go ahead and use a lot of methods to tap the unencrypted traffic that might be hosted on the web application because of expired certificates or just because it's a test environment. And all of that could be done with a little bit of query, and you get detailed steps out of it. That's just amazing. The thing that I've highlighted here during my exercise was that a lot of resources do have public IPs. A lot of resources do not have firewalls or WAFs protecting them, which is the web applications. A lot of people still use weak credentials because these dictionaries that I use to crack the virtual machines, these dictionaries are available publicly on the internet. And yeah, and it's just possible to download as a text file. Some misconfiguration, network security groups, and improper logging for you to go undetected. While I was decrypting the passwords and the username and the lateral movement, there was no alarms raised if there was no custom logging enabled there. Yeah. In short, poor architectural choices. You still need architects to design a cloud environment. The point is, if it's not designed, they all have already holes available to move into cybersecurity gaps.
So one question, Mohit, how do you want to mitigate all these
Yeah,
vulnerabilities? You want to
I'm
use
coming to that.
application firewall, or you want to give us a few details about what you can recommend?
Yeah, that's where I'm leading to also. Yeah,
Okay,
thanks for
sorry,
that.
I'm a little
But
eager.
then, but my final attempt was to try and generate a phishing attack, and the phishing attack, I wanted to understand how these things work. So I went ahead and asked it to what do organizations use mostly for internal communication. And there was a response that compliance emails are available. What is the most famous compliance companies that are being used? You can actually get domains that look very similar to it in very cheap quantities, and the large language model can actually automate that process too. The email, how do they look and feel, is a general Google search. It's available on the internet, but I did not use it. I just asked ChatGPT to create an email format for me. The button here leads to a a container in a storage account that has a script that that downloads and executes silently. Yeah, so that this is how I created, and it I created a keylogger and active Windows logger, which was silent. It was PowerShell based. So the moment you say yes, and it's possible to also go under the radar if they are already admin. So it's a mass attack for phishing. So in case if even one of them gets through, then you get the credentials right off the bat. Yeah. So I installed a keylogger in this button here. So the moment you see something familiar that yes, NIS is recorded right now, do you have to perform a training? It goes ahead and gives you that. And the domain, it's possible to even not buy the domain and generate emails based on domain. That's called emails, the domain spoofing, and it's not very difficult. It's even if you don't know it, it's possible to do it with asking these large language models to do it. And this is what I was highlighting before. Um, the White Rabbit Neo. It's one of those refined large language models that could help you with your security concerns. I did not spend much time in in uh, in making it work for me, but the initial attempts were obvious failures. So these things are moving pretty quick to understand that these things can happen, right? Again, the now coming back to the other side of things, then Gen AI has a double role. The same thing that I could do to to get into an organization, the same things can be done to protect the organization and make sure that these attempts that are very obvious and common could be tested before. And all of this can be automated the same way I automated an attack, the same way it could automate a defense also. So it's not just about attacking something, it's about defending something also. So when you create an architecture, it's possible to feed that architecture to this large language model and ask for attack vectors and check if those attack vectors are valid. And this could be just a thought exercise. Most of those thought exercises lead to good architectural choices. For example, the virtual machine. If there was no public IP address, that would be so much easier. I couldn't have done everything else. Yeah. There's a bright side too, because a lot of companies are now using this thing for security hygiene, generative hygiene, and malware analysis, and creating rules that base themselves on these hypotheses, right? So, I'm not sure if you've heard about Microsoft Security Copilot. It's a large language model similar to, it's actually much more than White Rabbit Neo. There's a lot you can do, and it can integrate to SIEM tools and the logging, and it can orchestrate the whole thing that I was doing, but from the defense perspective. And then it has a lot of plugins for if you want to work with other domains or other clouds too. Yeah. This was a video that was released by Microsoft, in which they show how the Copilot is in action. It analyzes all the logs that have been stored in the log analytics and tries to understand what movement has been happening during the network analysis. Yeah. The demo is on their cloud, so you could probably look at it there. Google also, and all of them have been coming up with frameworks that they've been implementing on their cloud. Google has Ceph. There's other pillars that you could use for Meta, and then there's OpenAI. I've taken this from another website, but that's available on OpenAI Safety also, how they are trying to implement these things so that the kind of prompt that I give should not lead to results that are available. But you have to understand that these models can be run offline now. There's DeepSeek and others that could be run offline, and that may not have the same safety features built in. Yeah, cool. The initiative, you have to make sure that these things are deployed and working in a system, right? These things, when they are implemented in your organization, it's possible to do it in step-by-step way. And this is a guide from Microsoft where you could go ahead and start with a small team, then go ahead and deploy architecture locally, and then encourage your users to use that local large language model. That's abhi nahi. Large language models in a way, right? So the custom feedbacks could still make them available, but your information would still stay in your organization. You have the privilege of using the large language models generated by somebody else, but then also your information stays in-house. We're doing this with a couple of clients also, and it's proving to be quite successful. For example, you could go ahead use Meta's Olama free of cost. It's possible to run it on a container, and there's something called an Open UI, that Open Web UI, which is also a container. So these two containers talk to each other. Your data remains intact. It's possible to use the memory for these large language models also as containers. So whatever information you have, the filters can be applied. If you do not want certain queries to be executed, then they are not executed. Yeah, the takeaway: use correct compliances and design before you implement it. Fix cloud misconfigurations, and all of this could be done by just doing the exact same steps that I did. Yeah, always repeat these exercises, because these large language models and these configurations, they keep changing. It's advised that every 6 months we go ahead and analyze the infrastructure again, and it's so much easier to do it with the large language models and generative AIs. Yeah. Yeah, there's a very famous meme going on, and I wanted to be part of that. So AI doesn't take your job essentially. As a security engineer, a cybersecurity engineer, as an architect, it enhances it. I've been a better architect since, and I'm pretty sure you all can be too. Yeah. Um, yeah, there's this repository about if you want to learn more about this. It's called LLM for Cybersecurity. Please visit the repository. It's not mine, it's somebody else's, but they've done a good job of exposing these things. Yeah. Uh, if any of you wants to be part of a quiz, do you use generative AI in cybersecurity investigation? You could post it on chat. Um, Not sure if that's the right way to do it, but next time I would probably do a poll. But it would be nice to know if any of you use generative AI in investigation or incidents. it might not be the good idea to do it on chat right now. So I'm going to move along, and that would be thank you from me. If any of you have any questions, if any of you have any inputs, most welcome. And the one thing that I wanted to highlight is this forum is open for everyone. So in case any of you want to share any input, do you have something to talk about, please reach out. We're open, we're looking for people to talk about stuff. And it would be amazing if any of you have something to share and would want to share it with the community. There's nothing else, then yeah, then this would be all from us. Thank you,
I
Glenn.
just want to tell you quickly about our next session in April. Then we go over to more kind of compliance. This is also compliance, but we go back from the AI world onto basic classification in Microsoft 365. And I really wanted to have some input and some feedback on any challenges you experience when you try to implement the classification in your organizations and things like that. And we will talk about the process of how to doing it. Yeah, so it's a kind of a feedback session. Yes.
Yeah. And I would share the link for that too. That's from Microsoft Governance User Group, right? And I'll share the link for that, so we could, if you're interested, you could join that too. If any of you have any inputs or any questions, this would probably be the time. I'll take one more minute, and if it isn't, I will give you 15 minutes of your time back, so that you could have a nice, lovely evening ahead of you. Yeah. And Yun, thank you so much for the input. I see you're typing something, so I'm gonna wait. Oh yeah, Glenn and me, we are kind of Purview people. Glenn is much more advanced than me on that, but we do use Purview. And Purview is a very important thing to use when implementing these things, because it's possible to, if a large language model is able to learn about something, it's a little bit difficult to manage how it reacts to everybody else. So you have to govern your information a little bit more. Glenn, could you say something about that?
Yeah, it's like depends on. See, you have a question about pure to classified information. You have to like divide classification into two. It's like, is it structural classification or unstructured classification? No, data. Sorry, yeah. So yeah, we are using PureView a lot, and we are going to talk about that next time.
Yeah. It's not advised to use a large language model and feed information directly, feed your data directly. It's really advised to make sure you have a proper hierarchical structure of access management and distribution before these large language models are plugged in. Yeah. Glenn, could you put in your LinkedIn? Yeah, that's my LinkedIn if you want to connect, and Glenn would input his, and if any of you want to share your inputs, that would be okay too, right?
Yeah,
That would be awesome. Yeah, so my LinkedIn is here, and Glenn, if you could put your LinkedIn. If you want to talk about these things, we're more than happy to do that.
Put in the chat here, 2 seconds.
Yeah. We both use a Purview, and we work with Purview a lot for our customers too. Yeah. Glenn is probably the more expert in this, so he has lovely points around that. He's worked extensively with Purview. Yeah, I think we don't have any other questions. Glenn, do you have something to say?
No, I think we should go out and enjoy the sun. It's spring here in Norway, so we should try to get some couple of hours before it's getting dark again.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time. You all have a lovely evening ahead of you. I see you when I do in the next one. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.